Today I want to speak a little bit about being judged by the law of liberty, and I want to read from James. We're going to read from James chapter 2. Let me just find the right verse here. It says in verse 9, "But if you have respect to persons, you commit sin, and are convinced of the law as transgressors. For whosoever shall keep the whole law, and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. For he that has said, do not commit adultery, said also, do not kill. Now, if you commit no adultery, yet if you kill, you are become a transgressor of the law. So speak ye, and so do, as they that shall be judged by the law of liberty." Now, what does that mean? James comes and he uses a wonderful analogy here. He uses the Old Testament law, and this is where, and I believe this is the correct interpretation and use of the law. Exactly what Paul said to Timothy. He said we can use the law as long as what we use it lawfully. Now, this is a very practical explanation of how to use the law in a lawful way. He came and he explained the principle of being judged by a law. And this is what he said. He said, if there are 10 commandments and you obey all, yet you offend in one, you became a transgressor of the law, and by the law is convicted as a sinner. This is what it says in verse 9. You are convinced of the law as a sinner. So you are convinced of the law as a sinner when you break one of all of them. Now, that sounds very harsh, and one would say, why would James even write such a thing to the church? Why would he even quote the law? Now, the next verse is what is of utmost importance, and this it says, "So speak ye, and so do, as they that shall be judged by the law of liberty." So he says, in the same way, speak and do with this mindset that if you break one of the 10 commandments, then you are transgressor of the whole law. In the same way, we are not under the law of the 10 commandments anymore, but we are under the law of liberty. The law of liberty. What is the law of liberty? Let us have a look at the law of liberty. "But whosoever looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues therein, him being not a forgetful hearer, but the doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deed." So here it talks again in verse 25 about chapter 1 verse 25 about the law of liberty. We go to verse 23. It says, "But if any be a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like unto a man beholding his natural face in a mirror. For he beholds himself, goes away, and straightway forget what manner of man he was. But whosoever looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues therein, and him being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deed." So what he says here is when we look into the perfect law of liberty, we see what kind of man we are. When we look into the law of Moses or the 10 commandments, we see what kind of man we are. We see ourselves as sinners. But when we look into the perfect law of liberty, we see ourselves as righteous and blessed, and we see ourselves as reconciled unto God through one sacrifice, Jesus Christ. We see his obedience on our behalf and how perfection came our way as a free gift. Now, that is the law of liberty. The law of liberty is the principle by which we are seen as fully liberated from the law of Moses, plus all its effects in our lives, liberated from the flesh and its effects. That is what the law of liberty is. The principle of God incarnated into human flesh, liberating every human being from the system of observing your own ability, looking at a standard by which you must live up to, and then trying to live up to that by your own ability. We have been liberated from that. That's the law of liberty. Now it says here that when we're under the law and we break the law in one part, we're guilty of all. In the same way, he says, live as if you will be judged by the law of liberty, meaning you don't want to break the law of liberty, not even in one part in your life, but in every part in your life. You don't want to live outside the revelation of who he is a reflection or is a manifestation of who you are. You don't want to, a breaking of the law of liberty, or the frustrating the grace of God would be to go back under the law. So the way you break the law of liberty is by saying, I'm not liberated anymore, and I need to do to get, or do to become, or I will be by what I do. So we don't want to break the law of liberty in any area of our life. So in the area of marriage, in the area of finances, in the area of church attendance, in the area of loving our neighbor, in the area of reading the Bible, we want to have a life born from the full revelation of who Christ is, and we don't want to mix the gospel of Jesus with a wrong mentality, the old way. So what I was actually saying in James here is, when you are under the law, if you broke it in one area, you're breaking it in all. He says, when you're under grace, don't break the law of liberty by mixing the liberty gospel with the wrong message, the message of works righteousness. Because if you just, a little bit of leaven will leaven the whole lump. That's what it is actually meaning right there. So know this, that we are under the law of liberty, and let's live in such a way, like when we were under the law, we didn't want to break any part of the law, although we broke so many parts of it. In the grace, let us have this thing in mind, that we don't want to see one area of our life polluted by a wrong belief. Amen.